If you go looking for the Dead Sea Scrolls online right now, the internet will tell you that something terrifying just happened. The scrolls were DNA tested. The results are shocking. Scientists uncovered a secret that rewrites history, and someone, somewhere, tried to keep it buried. Here is the strange truth. Two real pieces of science really did just change how we understand the Dead Sea Scrolls. One of them involves DNA. One of them involves an artificial intelligence with a biblical name. But neither of them found a hidden message, or a buried secret, or anything the headlines are promising you. What they actually found is quieter. And in some ways, it is stranger than the clickbait. Because between them, these two studies suggest that the oldest surviving copies of the Bible may be older than we thought, and that they may never have been the work of a single isolated group at all. Let me show you what the science really says, and exactly where the hype takes over. First, if you have never truly looked at them, understand what the Dead Sea Scrolls are, because the stakes here are enormous. In 1947, in caves above the Dead Sea near a ruined settlement called Qumran, shepherds stumbled onto clay jars filled with ancient manuscripts. Over the years that followed, searchers recovered the remains of roughly 900 separate texts, tens of thousands of fragments of brittle animal skin and papyrus. Among them were the oldest copies of the Hebrew Bible ever found. Before the scrolls, the earliest complete Hebrew scriptures we had were medieval, copied around 1,000 years after these. The scrolls pushed that window back by a full millennium to within a few centuries of the events themselves. One of them, the Great Isaiah Scroll, preserves almost the entire book of Isaiah, written more than 2,000 years ago. For anyone who cares how the words of the Bible have survived, these fragments are about as close to the source as we can get. And for decades, there was a tidy story about where they came from. It went like this. A small, secretive Jewish sect, often identified as the Essenes, lived out at Qumran, copied these texts by hand, and hid them in the surrounding caves, perhaps as Roman armies closed in. One community, one library, sealed in the desert. It is a clean, satisfying picture. And the new science has started to pull it apart. Start with the DNA. This is the study the headlines turned into a horror movie. Here is what actually happened. Because most of the scrolls are written on parchment, and parchment is animal skin, a team of researchers realized that the scrolls carry the DNA of the animals they were made from. So they did something clever. They took tiny samples from the fragments and sequenced that animal DNA. They were not reading the words. They were reading the skins. And the skins talked. Almost every fragment turned out to be sheep. But a few were made from cow. That sounds trivial until you think about the desert. You cannot raise cattle out at bone-dry Qumran. Cowhide had to come from somewhere greener, somewhere else in the country, which means at least some of these scrolls were not made at Qumran at all. They were carried there. The DNA did something else too. By comparing how closely related the animals were, researchers could work out which fragments came from the same hide, and therefore the same original scroll. In one striking case, two fragments that scholars had long assumed were pieces of a single copy of the book of Jeremiah turned out to be unrelated. One was sheep, one was cow. They were two different copies, with wording that did not perfectly match. Sit with that for a second. It suggests that around 2,000 years ago, more than one version of a book of the Bible could sit side by side, and that the scrolls as a whole may not be one sect's private library, but a cross-section of Jewish writing, gathered from across the region. None of this is airtight. The samples are tiny and fragile, and each skin's origin is an educated guess, not a receipt. But it is careful, published work, and it quietly pushes the story away from one lonely sect in one set of caves. Now the second study, the one with the artificial intelligence. For decades, scholars estimated the age of a scroll with their own eyes. It is called paleography, the study of handwriting. An expert compares the shapes of the letters to other dated examples and estimates how old the writing is. It works, but it leans on human judgment, and it can drift over time. Now a computer is trying to do the same thing. A team based at the University of Groningen built a machine learning model and named it Enoch, after a figure from the biblical tradition. They fed it a set of scrolls whose ages had been pinned down by fresh radiocarbon dating, and they taught it to read the fine details of the handwriting and connect those styles to real dates. Then they turned it loose on scrolls that no one had firmly dated. The result, published in 2025, pointed in a consistent direction. Many of the scrolls appear to be older than scholars believed, some by decades, a few by as much as a century. A number of them may reach back into the 4th or 3rd century before the Common Era, and one case stood out. A fragment of the Book of Daniel had been dated by handwriting to a comfortable distance after the book was supposedly written. The new analysis pulled it earlier, to roughly 230 to 160 years before the Common Era. Startlingly close to when Daniel itself is thought to have been composed. A copy almost within living memory of the original. If that holds, it reshapes our timeline for when these texts were written and how fast they spread, and now the honesty our brand insists on. Enoch is new. In testing, it dated scrolls correctly about 80% of the time. That is impressive. It is also not certainty, and the scholarly reaction has been genuinely split. Some researchers welcomed it as a powerful new tool. Others urged caution, warning that a model trained on a limited set of examples can carry hidden errors, and that no artificial intelligence should overturn a century of human expertise on its own. This is not science against faith. This is science still arguing with science. So step back and compare all of that to the headlines. The internet says the scrolls were DNA tested and the truth is terrifying. The reality is that the DNA came from sheep and cattle, and it told us where the parchment was born. The internet says an AI decoded a hidden secret. The reality is that an AI estimated the age of handwriting and suggested the texts are older than we thought. There is no buried message here, no suppressed prophecy, no secret that anyone hid from you. What there is something historians find genuinely thrilling, and the clickbait cannot be bothered to explain. The oldest words of the Bible may be older and more widely shared than the neat old story ever allowed. And here is the part that keeps this whole thing alive. Of the tens of thousands of fragments pulled from those caves, many are still undated, unread, or too damaged to fully decipher. The DNA work has sampled only a fraction of the collection. Enoch has looked at only a slice of the handwriting. Every new skin sequenced, every new date estimated, could shift the picture again. The Dead Sea Scrolls have kept scholars arguing for nearly 80 years, and the newest tools we have, genetics and machine learning, have not ended that argument. They have reopened it. The internet promised you a hidden secret. What science actually found was something much rarer. Not certainty. More questions. So I want to hear from you. When science reaches back to the oldest known copies of the Bible and says they are older and more scattered than we assumed, does that make the text feel more solid to you or less? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. Thanks for watching. If you like your mysteries told straight, the evidence first and the hype last, subscribe for more mysteries of the past, and I will see you in the next one.